Welcome to SRG Insights, where we answer your questions about sales, sales management, and sales training. And today's question is,
how do you manage a sales team if you don't all work in the same area?
it's a really good question, about how do you manage a remote sales team? And I think that's something sales managers have struggled with for years. And it reminds me of a blog post that I published earlier this week on the use of sales enablement technology, which I'm a huge proponent of. And I love the idea of having more analytics. And, there's no shortage of analytics through your CRM systems. But I think it also poses a risk for sales managers in that they can become so reliant on the analytics that they become somewhat of what I would call an armchair quarterback and really aren't necessarily making the connection they need to with the members of their sales team. And we think about the overall objective of a sales manager, it really comes down to three key skills: the ability to manage, coach, and lead their sales team. And all of those, by their very nature, are social. So what we want to do is think about some techniques you can use that would allow you to better manage a remote team, coach a remote team, and lead a remote team. Let me start with managing performance. So I think there's this notion out there that about a lot of sales managers, if you have a remote salesperson, you really need to just focus on the results, and if they're hitting the results, then you're fine. And I can understand that rationale, but I actually think that logic is flawed because the results are backwards looking in nature, and that logic only works until such time as if and when they miss the results. And then all of a sudden, you're kind of behind the game. So we really want to emphasize, and particularly important with remote salespeople, is to communicate clearly. So what is the result that you expect? What actions do you want them to take that lead to that result? For example, the result may actually be the achievement of a sales quota, but you may have an expectation on going on so many in-person calls, sending out proposals, new account penetration, all things that can lead to achieving those sales results. So as a remote manager, you really want to focus on not only the results, but also the underlying behaviors that drive the results. And I think with a veteran team, that could come across almost as micromanaging. So you want to be very skillful and artful in how you do that. You don't necessarily need to say, well, let me understand, how many sales calls you went out on last week. That information should be available to you through either the CRM or a sales report. What you want to focus on is a conversation. Tell me a little bit about who you visited last week. How did those calls go? Were there clear action items? And then if there aren't clear action items, that's an opportunity for you to coach and really contribute value in terms of helping them identify how they could advance opportunities. Which brings me to the next area of coaching, and specifically opportunity coaching, which again uses that technology, the CRM system, to examine the pipeline, and then allows you to have a one-on-one conversation with each salesperson, take a look at their individual pipeline, and then take a look at those opportunities as you're discussing that may not have a clear next step or may be stalled in one particular stage. And then really you can start to ask some deal coaching questions that relate to how are you going to advance those opportunities. And here's 5 deal coaching questions that we would encourage you to ask. So the first of those questions is, what does a customer's business need? So if the salesperson can't clearly articulate the business need, there clearly is more work on their part to ask questions and really identify priorities. What's the unique value that we bring to that customer? Can they really articulate the value proposition and how it ties to those needs? Who are the decision makers and who are the key influencers? Do they really have an understanding? Have they mapped the organization to really make sure you're in a position to reach all the people necessary to get to a positive outcome? Who's your competition? Who are we competing against? And ultimately, the 5th question, why are we going to win? What are our strengths relative to the competition? And what are our win themes? And that also involves confidence in the salesperson. And your job as a manager to build that confidence as they pursue opportunities. There's another type of coaching, though, as well that's at least as important. That's skills coaching. And it's the job of every manager to help their salespeople improve selling skills. And that does require some time in the field, but a lot of that planning can actually happen in advance. So you can do an assessment of those skills, and maybe have the salesperson do a self-assessment, and develop a coaching plan focused on 1 or 2 key selling skills that you're going to focus on that quarter. And then with that limited time you have the salesperson in the field, go out and observe calls. And I use the word observe intentionally because many managers can't resist the temptation when they go out on a call to actually start running the call. And it may be that as a manager, you're in a better position to close that business, But you have to be cognizant, especially with remote salespeople, that they're on sales calls all the time where you're not present. So you have to resist that temptation to jump in and really observe and focus on the key skills that you're going to work on. And then following that call, you want to debrief with the salesperson. And again, the temptation may be to share with them what didn't go as well as you like. But if that coaching is not a positive experience, they're going to tune you out. They may not even schedule you to go on additional calls next time you come out to visit. So make sure you're sharing with them something positive that you've seen on that call, getting their thoughts first as to how the call went, where the areas for improvement are, and then adding your advice as a coach as to how they may do it differently or better in the future. So again, sales coaching is really critical. And then that leads to the third responsibility of a manager. So you're managing your team, you're coaching to your team, but you also need to lead and inspire. And if your salespeople are in the same office, that's a little bit easier because you can walk the hallways and you can start to have hallway conversations and share with them what's going on in the company and get their input and also understand their concerns. But it's even more important with your salespeople that are kind of disconnected from your office. So what I like to recommend, again, using technology, is a video call or a Skype call where you can actually see the facial expressions, see the energy level, and use that opportunity to share and update them on what's going on in the company, what's going on with your products, what's going on in the industry. Ask them for their input, get their thoughts so you really know what's going on in their mind, and try to understand if there's any underlying concerns. And that's a great job of any leader, is to really make a personal connection. And again, a Skype call is a much better way to do that. Too many managers and too many of us altogether get caught up in texts and email, and we lose all of the personal interaction that is so essential to the art of sales and sales management. So I hope these techniques that I've shared with you are helpful in terms of managing a remote sales team. Again, we're huge believers in technology, CRM, video conferencing, social networks, all really now foundational to sales and sales management, but they're not a replacement for the personal interaction necessary to manage, coach, and lead your teams. Thank you.